Hi and welcome. You are listening to Listen and Relax. Sit back and enjoy these 6 crazy X stories that I will narrate for you. If you want us to continue making these videos, please let us know in the comments what you think about the stories and if we should continue. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated when we post new exciting stories. It's tough for me to talk about this, but here it goes. I'll try to keep it as short as I can. February 2012. I was in my third year of engineering when I made a life-changing decision. I dropped out. The reason? I was determined to build a successful career so I could make enough money to marry the woman I loved. I worked hard, putting in 12-hour workdays, pouring everything I had into my job. My dream was to be successful enough to win her parents' approval for our marriage. At that time, our relationship was amazing. We were happy, and I truly believed we were heading towards a future together. March 2014. By now, things were looking up. I had saved enough money to buy my first car and was about to buy a house. I had finally reached a point where I felt like I could give her the life I had always dreamed of, but I had no idea what was coming next. April 7th, 2014. I remember the conversation so clearly. She said, "You remember that guy I work with? He's born rich, and he's going on a trip to Europe." I didn't think much of it. "Good for him," I said. Little did I know that comment would mark the beginning of the end for us. April 15th, 2014. She told me, "I think we should break up." I was shocked. "Why?" I asked. "I've worked all these years to make something of myself." "For us." Her answer? "My parents wouldn't agree to this. You're not rich enough for them to approve." I tried everything I could to convince her. I offered to meet her parents, to talk to them, to make them see how much I loved her. But she didn't want to hear it. She refused to let me meet them and even change her phone number. I respected her decision. Even though it broke my heart, I walked away, heartbroken but determined to move on. Months later, I learned the truth. She had been seeing that guy, the rich one she had mentioned, the one who was going to Europe. Turns out, they had been seeing each other for quite some time. Not only that, she had introduced him to her parents and told them that they had been in a relationship for the last 4 years. A story that wasn't true. It was me she had been in a relationship with for those years. Her parents had accepted him, and everything I had worked for, the long hours, the sacrifices, the hopes I had built, seemed meaningless. December 2014. By the end of the year, she and that guy got married. It's been tough to relive the story, but I wanted to share it to get it off my chest. Thank you to those who understood. I never imagined I would find myself in a situation like this, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Here is my story. It all began with my ex-girlfriend. One day, out of nowhere, she ended our relationship. Everything seemed fine one minute, and the next she was telling me it was over. Naturally, I was confused and hurt, but I tried to respect her decision. For hours later, she called me again, saying she had made a mistake and wanted to get back together. I was torn, but I told her I needed some time to think about it. A week later, we met to have a serious conversation. I made the difficult decision to move on. She was upset, and there were tears, but we agreed to remain friends. I thought everything would be okay from there. I was wrong. A few days later, I started receiving a flood of messages from her family, all on Facebook. They were angry with me for ending the relationship, calling me names and blaming me for breaking her heart. This was especially confusing to me because she had been the one to end things in the first place. Still, I blocked everyone and tried to move on. Then, the next morning, I woke up to a message from her saying she was in a terrible state and that she needed help. She claimed to have harmed herself, and I was terrified. I immediately tried calling her, but her phone was off. In a panic, I called my older sister, who was at work, and asked her to drive me to my ex's house. When we arrived, we knocked on her door, hearts racing with fear. After a long wait, she finally opened the door, revealing 3 very small marks on her wrist. It turned out she had only taken a few painkillers. We were incredibly upset. It became clear to me that she had fabricated the entire situation in an attempt to manipulate me. I knew then that I had to walk away. But the drama didn't end there. A few months later, I received a message on Facebook from her aunt. She claimed that my ex was in trouble and needed my help. Reluctantly, I unblocked her and agreed to listen. I asked what was going on, and her response was shocking. She claimed she had been hurt by someone. Naturally, I felt devastated and wanted to understand what had happened. Here is what she told me. She had met a man online and agreed to meet him. They went to his car where they kissed and touched each other. She said they had consensual relations. I was taken aback and could not believe what I was hearing. Immediately, I blocked her again. To make matters worse, I later found out that after her earlier actions to manipulate me, she had a relationship with my sister's boyfriend. That was the final straw for me. I've been sitting on this for a while, and I needed to share it. It's been years since all of this happened, but the manipulation, lies, and hurt still sting. The biggest lesson I learned is that sometimes you just have to cut toxic people out of your life, no matter how difficult it is. I'm going to be honest here. I'm not proud of everything I've done in the past, and I definitely wasn't always the most stable or rational person in my relationships. We all have our moments of weakness, and sometimes pain makes us act in ways we later regret. But I've learned a lot about myself, and more importantly, I've learned the value of grace, forgiveness, and self growth. Let's start at the beginning with my first relationship when I was 17. I was young, naive, and in love with someone who wasn't as committed as I was. He cheated on me, and instead of leaving, I stayed. I remember, in a desperate attempt to win him back, I even tried to make myself more appealing to him. I made a tight fitting negligee out of clean, black trash bags to make myself feel more attractive. In hindsight, it's embarrassing, but it was my way of trying to salvage something that wasn't working. Things didn't get better. I continued to stay in the relationship, even though he kept hurting me. At one point, after he cheated again, I panicked so badly that I thought I was having a heart attack. I ended up in the hospital and even spent time in a psychiatric facility. But somehow I kept going back. I would call him over and over, question him endlessly, and spiral into anxiety, fearing that he was cheating again. Fast forward to the end of that relationship. He wasn't the only one who displayed erratic behavior. When I tried to break things off, he would make extreme threats, saying things like he'd harm himself if I left. He would show up at my place unannounced, demanding my attention in unhealthy ways. It was toxic, and yet I didn't know how to walk away for good. In a later relationship, I broke up with someone, but it didn't end there. He came back to my house to retrieve his things, and as expected, he was heartbroken. I felt terrible for him, but it didn't stop him from retaliating. He stopped making payments on the car I had co-signed for him, disappeared, and it took over a year for the car to be recovered. I was left with a huge financial burden and a mark on my credit. Another relationship ended after an accidental pregnancy. I didn't want an abortion, but he didn't want children. We parted ways, and I decided to raise my child alone. 3 years later, after I had moved on and was in a stable relationship, he reached out to me. He admitted that he had never gotten over me, that he regretted his decision, and that he wanted to be a part of our child's life. I was moved, but by then I had already built a life of my own, and I chose to stay where I was. Looking back, I see how all these experiences shaped who I am today. There were moments of intense heartbreak and personal turmoil, but it's all a part of growing up. Eventually, I had a psychotic break in my early 30s, and I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I know now that mental health struggles are real and can be just as challenging as any emotional pain from heartbreak. I had moments of auditory hallucinations where I would hear voices criticizing me constantly. It was terrifying, but with treatment and medication, I've found peace and stability again. On a lighter note, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. The person I once swore I'd never get back together with, someone I had even dedicated a Taylor Swift song to, turned out to be the person I eventually married. I guess we can say like attracts like. And despite everything, we've been together for over 9 years now, and I don't think we're going anywhere. It's been a long journey, but I think that heartbreak, mistakes, and personal challenges all contribute to who we become. There's no shame in having difficult experiences. We're all just trying to learn, grow, and love along the way. My hope is that others can find strength in their struggles, just as I have. I was in a relationship for a year with one of my seniors after school. Unfortunately, due to constant misunderstandings and arguments, we eventually broke up. We stopped talking, and he started dating one of his close friends. I on the other hand, joined engineering and moved into a hostel. Over time, we both moved on with our lives. Fast forward 3 years, and one night, I received a call from a number I vaguely recognized. It was past midnight, and when I picked up, I immediately realized something was off. It was him, my ex. But he wasn't himself. He sounded completely out of control, clearly intoxicated. Me? Hello? Him. Come outside. I'm waiting outside your hostel. I was in shock. I honestly didn't believe him at first, thinking it might be a prank. But then I opened my window and looked down, and there he was, standing outside. I couldn't believe it. I immediately told him to go away and leave me alone. But he wasn't listening. He started shouting my name, getting louder and more agitated. His words became more hurtful, and he began insulting me and my family. Feeling disturbed and overwhelmed, I ended the call and blocked him. But that didn't stop him. He kept calling, and when I didn't answer, he started acting out even more. He tried to climb over the hostel boundary wall, but couldn't get through because of the glass and bushes lining it. In his frustration, he began throwing stones and beer bottles at the windows of the rooms. It was exam time, and the hostel was filled with students studying, trying to focus. Some of the girls, understandably scared and disturbed by the noise, complained to the guards. But I quickly learned something surprising. Our hostel guards were not as attentive as we'd hoped. They didn't do much to intervene in the situation before he and his friends eventually left. The whole incident was incredibly embarrassing for me, and it left me shaken. Thankfully, the situation didn't escalate further, and none of my classmates or other hostel residents knew exactly who was behind the disturbance. There were several girls named Priyanka in the hostel, so they assumed it was just some local troublemakers, not realizing it was tied to my past. Only my roommates knew the full story. It was a difficult moment in my life, one I never expected from someone I once loved. I never thought my ex would behave in such a reckless and disrespectful way. It's something no one should ever have to go through, especially when it involves hurtful and degrading language directed at you and your loved ones. No one deserves that kind of treatment. Looking back, I can only feel grateful that I'm no longer involved with someone who would behave so recklessly. It was an incredibly painful experience, but it has taught me the importance of boundaries and respect in all relationships. I've had my share of relationship drama, but one incident with my ex stands out above the rest. It was easily the most dramatic and bizarre thing she ever did, and it involved accusations, ultimatums, and a whole lot of confusion. Buckle up because this one gets wild. It all started innocently enough. My then girlfriend had come up to visit my hometown, and we spent the day sightseeing. Quickly realizing there wasn't much to see, we decided to grab some drinks at a local pub, joined by a group of my friends. It was a fun night, filled with laughter and stories. She got along well with everyone, and the evening seemed like a success. However, things took a turn once we got home. Our relationship, as much as we had good moments, was also filled with tension. It felt like for every happy moment, there was an equally intense argument waiting to happen. And so it did. After spending most of the week staying at her place, I was looking forward to a night out with my friends. I thought a little time apart would recharge me, but she didn't see it that way. To her, it was disrespectful for me to spend time with my friends instead of her. I brushed it off, but then came the bombshell. I can't believe you want to hang out with them, especially after what happened last week, she said. Naturally, I was curious and asked her what she meant. The response was something I never expected. She told me that one of my friends, Adrian, had followed her into the women's bathroom at the pub the previous week, making her feel uncomfortable by touching her inappropriately. She described him as putting his hand under her dress, saying, "You look amazing tonight." I was stunned and instantly switched into protective boyfriend mode, feeling both angry and confused. I called off my plans with my friends and spent the weekend with her, trying to support her, but the whole situation felt off. Later that week, I called up Adrian to get his side of the story. I was incredibly nervous, but had to hear the truth. When I asked him directly, he was as shocked as I was, firmly denying the accusation. He swore nothing like that had happened, and his reaction seemed genuine. I was left in a difficult position, unsure of what to believe. But after talking to him, I began to realize that my ex's story didn't add up. Over the following days, it became clear that the accusation was entirely false. She had created a rift between me and my closest friends, all for no reason. The lie had been born from a place of anger and jealousy. Eventually, she admitted that she had fabricated the entire story in an attempt to make me feel guilty for spending time with my friends instead of her. While we tried to move past it, the damage was done. Her words, though spoken in anger, carried a heavy weight. She had accused someone I trusted of a serious offense, and that's not something that can easily be undone. Her behavior left a lasting impact on my friendships, and even though she later apologized, the damage was irreversible. She had forced me to choose between her and my friend, and in the end, it was an easy decision. It was without a doubt the most crazy and hurtful thing my ex ever did. It wasn't just a lie, it was the manipulation, the attempt to turn me against someone I considered a close friend. And while the truth came out in the end, the scars it left behind stayed with me. I recently managed to escape from a toxic and abusive relationship that lasted for over 2 years. My ex partner was highly manipulative and exhibited disturbing behavior that I now recognize as narcissistic and sociopathic. Her actions were erratic, often violent, and destructive, particularly when she drank, which was frequently. Here are some of the things she did during our time together. She once poured boiling water over my head while I was sleeping. I ended up spending 6 days in the burn unit ICU. It's hard to understand why I went back to her after that, but I did. Looking back, I realized it was a terrible decision. My family and close friends had already disowned me for staying with her. On another occasion, she struck me on the head with a baseball bat while I was asleep, leaving me with 5 stitches. Her behavior led to me being banned from several places I frequented, including bars and even places where I lived. In one instance, it took her only 20 minutes to get me banned from one bar, and her actions led to me being evicted from 2 different residences. She also managed to steal $4,500 from my bank account while I was in jail, leaving me with less than $2. I shouldn't have trusted her with access to my account, but I did. She repeatedly called the police, making false accusations that I was physically abusing her. Despite never having been abusive, these false claims caused me significant problems and led to me spending several months in jail. The situation escalated when she called the police after I left her apartment in the early hours of the morning, following a fight about living arrangements. She had made similar false accusations before, and they eventually led to me being arrested. After spending months trying to survive in this toxic environment, I finally reached my breaking point. When I was released from jail, she had emptied my bank account and I was unable to pay for bail. I knew I had to get out of her life for good. I managed to gather evidence that proved her accusations were false, including police statements and hospital records that disproved her claims. I wrote a letter to the judge with all this evidence, and fortunately, the judge took my side. She dropped all the charges, and I was given a short probation sentence. But despite that victory, my record now includes a permanent mark that I will have to live with. Since then, I've distanced myself completely. I moved to a new location and changed my phone number, so she no longer has any way of contacting me. I saw her once recently at a library, and she tried to send someone over to talk to me, but I simply walked away. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that her life has continued to spiral. She's faced several recent evictions and is still struggling with her issues, but I've made the decision not to get involved any longer. I encountered her twice this year, and both times she caused more chaos in my life. The first time she showed up at my door in an abusive state, and the second time, she falsely accused me again, leading to a police intervention. I've since made it clear to everyone around me that I am no longer part of her life, and I am doing everything I can to move on and rebuild. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes it takes a crisis to realize what you truly need. I'm focusing on myself now, and have learned to take care of my mental health and well-being. Here's to new beginnings. I once had a girlfriend who cheated on me with my best friend, but that wasn't even the craziest thing she did to me. Not even close. One time, I was in Utah and she was in Texas. I was driving to one of my favorite restaurants, Cafe Rio. As I was on the road, I noticed I had a text message from her. I didn't read it until I got to the restaurant, and what I read absolutely shocked me. What are you doing going to Cafe Rio at 10 p.m.? Are you cheating on me? It was such an ironic text that I was at a loss for words at first. My first instinct was to be upset about the accusation, but then it hit me. How did she know where I was? I immediately called her to confront her. After some back and forth, I found out she had secretly installed a tracking app on my phone. She had been monitoring my every move, knowing exactly where I was at all times. I was furious. She'd violated my privacy in the most extreme way, all because she didn't trust me. It made me laugh in disbelief, especially considering she was the one who was unfaithful. A week later, I broke up with her after finding out she had been cheating on me with my best friend. I had a friend in computer science help me remove the tracking program from my phone, and that was the last time I had any contact with her.